How can we go about safeguarding our most precious assets, our children?
I'm Alyssa Blackburn.
I'm Mike Loder. The Tech Edge starts right now. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Tech Edge, presented by the team at AvePoint, where each episode we delve into the latest industry trends for business, IT, and of course their significance in today's ever-changing landscape. Today we discuss strategies to safeguard children's privacy in the digital age we now live in. Alyssa, this is an important topic. It's not one I've really come across, which is kind of interesting, but tell us a little bit more.
It is an important topic, and I am a parent. I have 3 children, and all of whom are involved in recreational sports or competition sports in some way, shape or form. But also over the last few years we've seen a number of really significant issues as it's related to children and minors, and also about how we keep and manage the information that we hold about them, and how we protect their interests and make sure that they're safe while they're doing all of these really important things. So our guest today has some really great stuff to say about this, and I'm really excited to introduce Karen Weaver, who's the CEO and founder of the Australasian Gymnastics and Dance Academy. Welcome, Karen. We're really excited to get your insights into this important topic.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm really looking forward to delving in this with you all.
Okay, so Karen, let's dive off the deep end. How do you ensure compliance and privacy laws and I guess regulations when handling information about children and minors? I have friends who have a blanket social media ban on their, newborn babies and such, and then I've got friends on the other side who are snap happy.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Myself, in the sporting industry, I commenced sport when I was 2 years of age. And then I founded Australasian Gymnastics and Dance Academy 25 years ago. And in the foundation in building that business over the past 25 years, what we've had to do with protecting privacy of information for not only for our staff or people from there, but especially our minors, it has really evolved, especially when it has come into the social platform or the social media platforms that are about. So in Australia, we've got the Privacy Act that protects individuals' rights to privacy, but under the age of 18, they really can't give consent. So it's really our responsibility, and it's an important topic, that we take this on and protect their privacy in what happens in the sporting realms. So, what I think is really important in business leaders to understand is that there's different regulations that apply in different jurisdictions, and particularly in the sporting world, it differs from sports to sports.
And we've seen certainly over the last few years, particularly coming out of the United States, and I know Karen obviously has a lot of experience in the gymnastics world, but we've seen some really awful things come out of the gymnastics community in the United States over the last couple of years. So what you're saying there is absolutely spot on in terms of being able to protect our children while we're doing that, but also being able to protect their privacy and doing that through the information that we hold about them. It's obviously we all want our children to be able to go and enjoy whatever recreational activities they are, be arts related or sports related, things like that. This is a really key thing that those organisations need to take into account. So Karen, tell us what steps do you think organisations can take to protect themselves from unauthorised access or breaches when it comes to information about children and minors?
This is a really, really good question, and I think it's important to implement strict access controls to limit who can access that information, especially that sensitive data. Use role-based access controls, RBAC, to ensure that authorised personnel can view and modify the information. I think it's also important that you have your data encrypted, not only just in transit but also in rest. Use secure protocols for transmitting data over networks, and also collect and retain only minimum necessary information about children and minors, and avoid strong unnecessary personal details. And I think it's really important that you have a regular review and delete any data that's no longer needed. I just really want to say in our industry, especially gymnastics, you mentioned about things that have happened in the past. We are very fortunate here in Australia that our national body, Gymnastics Australia, takes these steps very, very strongly, as we do. And we also have the Australian Sports Commission, who also has a lot of guidelines and protocols that we must follow and uphold. And here in Queensland, we are lucky that we also have, working with children, blue cards, that all of our staff, volunteers, judges, everyone must hold a blue card to be able to keep children protected in that way. But I just also want to make a point that our industry, being gymnastics, we have a lot of, it's a young sport. So about 80% of our coaching staff are also under the age of 18.
Wow.
So we've really got to make sure that they're under our supervision, they're under our protection, and they're under our care. And for me, it's really, really important that it's all about the children and making sure that we're keeping them safe on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that sort of makes it more complicated, doesn't it, with the staff members, of course, being of that age. But what strategies do you employ to educate those employees about the responsible handling of children's information?
Well, we have, from our national body, we have courses. So we have courses like Everybody's Unique. And not only that, we also have the Australian Sports Commission having guidelines and different courses. But in our business, we conduct regular training sessions for all of our employees, just making sure, especially that for those who are handling children's data. We cover topics such as privacy laws, data protection principles, and organisation policies. We develop clear and concise policies, privacy policies, specifically addressing children's data, making sure those policies are accessible to all employees that need them. And we create guidelines and outline how to collect, how to store and process children's information securely.
So I think what you're really making there is some really good points about some of the stuff that organisations need to have in place. So first of all, there's a regulatory aspect. So as Karen mentioned, we've got Gymnastics Australia and we've got Gymnastics Queensland and of course the Sports Commission, things like that, who all put standards out. What we then need to do is transition that to individual businesses or sports or other, recreational activities, or even things like after-school care, educational institutions, things like that. All need to look at, what this framework looks like for them, what's coming from the regulation, and then how do I interpret that in my own organisation. And then, as Karen said, really clearly communicating that to the staff. And again, as she said, which is a really important point, is most of her staff are minors. So she has that additional, she's got that additional burden responsibility to take into account with that. So it is really important for organisations to both, first of all, look at the regulations that they need to apply, but then figure out how it works in their environment and for their
Adapt
business.
It to their situation.
Exactly. So, Karen, obviously technology plays a huge role in this sort of space. What kind of technology or platforms do you or other organisations need to consider when we're managing information when it relates to children or minors?
Well, the platforms that we use, we have a platform that we put all of our data, our CRM in, and we sort of store it in on that platform there, and then we also have to upload some information to our national bodies for insurance purposes. So we use those platforms in that perspective, and follow the guidelines as to what we can use for that.
Let's go back to some of the stuff that you need to keep, particularly when it comes to some of the work that you do in having to travel with gymnasts and things like that. What kind of process does that look like for you, and what kind of considerations do you need to make when we're talking about not just stuff in the building kind of thing?
In regards to, like, when we did a trip away to Gladstone at the end of last year. And on that trip to Gladstone, we need to make sure that all of the parent helpers that were on board all had their blue cards, so that we had the protection side of it there. We also had to be very, very mindful of what sort of information that we put out on our social media platforms. And we also had very sort of strict enrolment forms and collecting the medical data that we needed of each of those children. And oh my gosh, the paperwork that was there was phenomenal. However, we had that all stored, had it all stored in our CRM gave access to certain personnel and staff who were on that trip, so that if they needed to get that information quickly. But we also, to be able to keep information and be able to communicate to those parents on the trip, we had a personalised Facebook group that only allowed for the parents of those children who were travelling to have access to, and we shared only photos of that trip on that platform to be able to give and give information as to how the trip was going, and to be able to keep them informed at all time, to give them peace of mind of their children travelling away with us as a tour and a group. So on that trip we had 34 people involved, and it was a fantastic trip, but it definitely was something that had to be monitored and handled very, very well for the security of the children.
Absolutely.
Yes. That's an interesting one with the social media side of things as well.
Exactly, definitely. And once again, it's going back to understanding what we need to do. So all of that information that needs to be captured, who has an allergy, who needs to take medication at what particular point in time, what the contact details for the parents are. Do the parents have the appropriate, authority and sign off to be there, things like that. So that's coming from the regulations. And then it's about, okay, now how do we implement that? How do we manage all of that monstrosity of paperwork to be able to capture that? And then, as Karen said, how do we be able to manage that going forward? So storing it in the right platforms, things like that, ensuring that it's protected. And she gave some great advice earlier about things like role-based access or encryption of information or things like that. All things that are absolutely critical for an organisation to take into account, particularly when we're dealing with things for children. Because, and as she absolutely nailed the point where she said, it's all about the kids. And
all about the kids,
definitely.
Karen, I want to thank you for joining us on the program. Unpacking this a little bit further, it's of course a very important topic as we've mentioned, but appreciate you and your time today.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
All right, that's the program for now. Of course, head to tickernews.co for more. A very good episode as always.
Absolutely.
Great guests.
Very much so. Thank you.
And of course, thank you to all of you out there in television land. We'll see you again very soon.
You're watching Ticker. We'll have more in just a few minutes.